Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode is kind of fun in that this episode is we finally kind of meet Vincent Van Ghoul in this one, or at least this incarnation of him. He appeared previously in a previous Scooby-Doo cartoon. I've discussed that a little bit, I think. If he was originally a character from the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. If you've ever seen it, it ran for 12 episodes and got a spin-off movie, and it was like one season in a movie. So yeah, if you've never seen it, go check it out. It probably won't take you very long to watch because it's very short. But yeah, but in case Vincent Van Ghoul is properly introduced in this, or at least this incarnation of him is properly introduced in this one, and it's kind of he's kind of an interesting character in this one, and I do kind of like it. But yeah, in any case, the episode opens up with Scooby and Shaggy watching a Vincent Van Ghoul movie where Vincent Van Ghoul plays a guy alongside his wife in a zombie apocalypse, and he winds up getting bitten, infected, and turns into a zombie. And I should mention this little movie sequence at the start does kind of cement the fact that Vincent Van Ghoul is kind of a pretty impressive actor. It does kind of showcase that he's a really good actor, and has kind of earned his reputation as a really good horror movie actor in this one. In any case, Scooby and Shaggy are watching, and around the time where Vincent Van Ghoul's character winds up getting turned into a zombie, there's suddenly a knock at the door, and the two of them go to answer it, to discover, much to their horror, that Vincent Van Ghoul is actually standing on their front porch and introduces himself. And of course, they don't really fully understand why Vincent Van Ghoul is even there to begin with, and actually begin panicking because they think he's a zombie, and tells him not to eat him not to eat their face. But of course Vincent Van Ghoul walks into their house, into Roger's Manor, very confused as to what they're talking about. But upon realizing they were watching one of his previous movies, it finally clicks for him, and he points out that and he starts sharing a bit of some production details regarding the movie, namely that he liked working on it, but the woman who hired to play his wife kept forgetting her lines, and they had to keep reshooting. So yeah, for that reason, he doesn't really regard it as one of his. He regards it as one of his favorites to film, but not so much one of his favorites to work with other people on. So, but in any case, so after realizing that Vincent Van Ghoul isn't a zombie, then start fanboying a little bit about the fact that Vincent Van Ghoul is in their house, and are actually very happy about the fact that he's actually there at all. And it's at this point where Vincent Van Ghoul reveals the reason why he's there in the first place, which is that Scooby and Shaggy apparently won an essay contest, which they openly admit they forgot they entered, because they entered many months ago, and it's only now getting back to them whether or not they won. But he does point out that he was particularly moved by their speech, and then proceeds to pull it out. And this is a really funny sequence where he points out where it very much points out the fact that Shaggy, a wordsmith, Shaggy Rogers is not. So it's just this really funny sequence where he makes this where this beautiful profound speech is constantly being interrupted with the word "like," and it is the funniest thing ever. I could not stop myself from smiling when I saw that. It was great, and I'm smiling now. It's a great little gag sequence. And in my case, Shaggy and Scooby are very happy about the fact that Vincent Van Ghoul decided that their essay was the best of the 10,000s that Vincent Van Ghoul probably got, and are very honored that he found their essay so moving. But then Vincent Van Ghoul reveals that in actuality he only got like 2, and the other one was a guy was some Eskimo kid who wrote the entire thing in his native language. So yeah, he couldn't real fully understand it, so he wound up going with Scooby and Shaggy's because he could actually read it. But in any case with that, after clearing up that misunderstanding, he then proceeds to escort them out of the house, stating that he made fondue for them, and he's going to be driving them home in what he calls their personal chariot. And well, Scooby and Shaggy are very happy about the fact that they get to be escorted to Van Ghoul Manor by Vincent Van Ghoul personally. Then they kind of do a double take when they discover that Vincent Van Ghoul's car is actually a hearse, and sure enough, he makes a pun about how he wouldn't be caught dead in anything else. And so yeah, I should explain this, but people probably know what I'm talking about. So everybody knows that people die and then they get buried and everything. That is very much a everybody knows how that works, because I'm sure everybody has attended a funeral at some point. But basically, if you don't know what a hearse is, a hearse is the vehicle that actually transports the coffin from the funeral hall to the gravesite so it can be buried. And yeah, and so that's kind of it's a bit of a dark joke, but it is kind of funny. And that's it's a pun, but it's a very dark pun, but it is a fun pun nonetheless, where he makes a joke about how he wouldn't be caught dead in anything other than a hearse, because that is the vehicle that they use to transport dead people. So yeah, it's a little dark when you explain it outright, but it is kind of funny, if a little morbid. But in any case, he then proceeds to bring them back to their house, where he actually pulls out an umbrella here, and Scooby and Shaggy are very confused, and Shaggy even admits that that the forecast didn't really call for rain, and sure enough, Vincent Van Ghoul points out that it's a local rainstorm situated over his house, and only his house, because, as he reveals, he actually set up a series of sprinklers and strobe lights to simulate the idea of a real rainstorm, and he actually had somebody install that on his house, because to put it nicely, he just needs it to sleep. And he wouldn't be caught dead in any place without it. And of course, he definitely needed it to sleep. So it kind of like a noise machine for him. But in any case, he then proceeds to walk in the house. He then proceeds to walk in the house, and once he goes inside, he admits that he kind of forgot how to do. They kind of almost forgot something, and then proceeds to sit down at an organ, which, as it turns out, he wired into his security system, and by putting in the correct keystrokes, he actually winds up setting off the security system and closing everything up, and declares that should keep them safe for the time being. And Scooby and Shaggy have no idea what the hell he's talking about, and he doesn't really, and Vincent Van Ghoul doesn't fully. He kind of gives a vague answer as to what they should be saved from. But then decides to break the silence by claiming that somebody said that Fondue was ready, which obviously Scooby and Shaggy see right through. But he decides that he tells them that he was just trying to lighten the mood, but decides to stop talking, and decides it's better to just go in and eat rather than just trying to explain what his joke was. At which point, Scooby and Shaggy actually wind up thanking him for the food, pointing out that it's very delicious, and they haven't really had Fondue before, but it's definitely now one of their personal favorites, and point out that it's actually kind of great. And Vincent Van Ghoul very much thanks him for the compliment, and points out that it's very nice to have a meal after all the strange things that have been happening, and there's also a really funny gag where he's just like, I don't really want to talk about this. And then Scooby and Shaggy immediately go, okay, and go back to eating. At which point he decides to tell them anyway. And it's at this point where he starts gesturing to all of the memorabilia from all of the various films he's made. And what we find out, and this is a very interesting thing that he brings up, is that what he claims is that his house is apparently overrun with various monsters from his various films, or at least that's what he thinks is happening. And of course we know by this point that that isn't really the case, because there are no real, because as established, it's vague, it's iffy depending on the continuity, but sometimes the monsters are real and sometimes they are not. So, and up until now, the monsters in the movie, in this series, have not been real. At least so far, not to my knowledge, they haven't. But yeah, he does point out that several of the monsters from his movies he believes have actually come to life, and ask Scooby and Shaggy if they know what it's like to actually go around their house being in constant fear that they can open the door and suddenly see something terrifying. And sure enough, he then proceeds to open a door and they see something terrifying. As we find out, currently, for whatever reason, there's a monster, one of his monsters, Mutant B, is a monster from one of his earlier movies, of the same name, I should mention. He's actually raiding his fridge for some reason, and when he opens it, it decides to start lumbering toward them and attack. And at which point Vincent Van Ghoul then proceeds to escort them into the main lobby where and proceeds to kind of just help them get through the house where they actually run into two monsters. On the ground floor, they meet Dr. Phobos, who is a parody of a monster from another movie that is a real movie you can go watch. But in any case, after seeing Dr. Phobos, they run up to see Dr. Jansen, who is yet another monster from that I know is a parody of House of Wax. I know it's a parody of that. But in any case, after doing that, they then proceed to flee downstairs. They then proceed to flee downstairs and try to get away from the monsters. And at which point he throws open the doors and tries to claw at they try to claw at the security system, but of course the security system doesn't work, and since the monsters are closing in on them, they can't get to the organ to set off the security system anymore. But in cases all three monsters are actually closing in on them, a fourth monster suddenly shows up, which is the titular monster of the episode that calls itself Nightfright. It then proceeds to show up and proceeds to attack the other three monsters and throw them along against the walls, which Vincent Van Ghoul states wasn't supposed to happen, which kind of implies that all of this was a stage thing that he did, and he does eventually admit to it later. But in any case, Nightfright approaches them, claiming that his name is Nightfright, and tells them to scream and says that it's time for them to die. Which I should mention, the monster then proceeds to repeat every single time it tries to confront them. And of course, the trio then proceed to run upstairs and run into one of Vincent Van Ghoul's spare bedrooms. Just narrowly avoid Nightfright from attacking them, and proceed to barricade themselves in the room. And at which point Vincent Van Ghoul remarks that this wasn't supposed to happen and there wasn't supposed to be a real monster going about. And at which point Scooby and Shaggy finally ask him what he's actually talking about, and Vincent Van Ghoul then straight up tells him that he paid a series of actors to actually dress up as the various monsters he's portrayed and attack Shaggy and Scooby in his house. All pretend, of course, but he does point out that the monsters were fake and they were never actually supposed to hurt anybody. But he does point out that this fourth monster, Nightfright, is actually real, and it proceeds to start barging its way into the bedroom as he says that, breaking down the door. At which point he tells Scooby and Shaggy. He then proceeds to tell Scooby and Shaggy to flee into the closet, and Vincent Van Ghoul follows him shortly after, with Nightfright eventually making his way into the room, and quickly realizing that they've actually hidden in the closet. Nightfright immediately goes for the closet, but when he opens it up, he actually discovers that they're completely gone. As we find out, Vincent Van Ghoul has actually, in addition to having set up several rain machines around his house, has also set up a series of secret passages in his house, which he admits he uses to kind of scare his guests, which he does do at one point earlier in the episode. But he also states that he uses it to get to the kitchen a little bit faster because he's lazy and doesn't like going through all the different hallways and stairs. So, in any case, after a very funny visual gag where the painting of Vincent Van Ghoul comes up and Vincent Van Ghoul is doing the exact same pose he was doing in the painting, the three of them actually wind up coming out and immediately go for the organ, so Vincent Van Ghoul can actually turn off the security system so they can get out of the house. Only to discover, much to his horror, that somebody apparently changed the password on his security system because now he's no longer able to get into it. And of course, he then proceeds to start panicking and has no idea what exactly is going on, and eventually starts shouting for somebody named Bill to come and help. And when Scooby and Shaggy ask him who he's talking to, it's then revealed that Vincent Van Ghoul has actually hidden a series of hidden cameras around his house as well, and that Scooby and Shaggy are apparently on a reality TV show where Vincent Van Ghoul invites people over to his house to scare them with his various monsters. So, basically this whole entire ploy was supposed to be like him setting off a movie career, a kind of like a series of short movie things where he films reality TV in his house, and everybody and the entire thing is that the monsters were supposed to come out, scare some guests, and of course Scooby and Shaggy wound up being the first victim of that because they won the essay contest. But in case he continues to keep calling for help from Bill, who we actually meet in this scene, and as we find out, Bill has no idea that there's actually a rogue monster in the house. He has no idea what's going on. He just thinks that he actually also talks with his producer, but Bill basically states that he has no idea what Vincent Van Ghoul is doing, and ultimately points out that the guy has seemingly gone off script. It's at this point where Nightfright actually winds up barging down the stairs once again stating his catchphrase before chasing Vincent Van Ghoul, Scooby, and Shaggy into the library, where they lower security grate so that the monster actually can't get in. And of course he actually can't. He's actually unable to actually get in, and starts trying to force his way in, but he can't reach them. At which point Vincent Van Ghoul points out that they're trapped, and there's likely no way anybody could actually get in and save them. And sure enough, after seeing the monster for the first time on camera, Bill even suggests that finally realizing that they're actually in danger and that there's an actual monster in the house, and knows that it isn't one of theirs. They then proceed to point out that they need to get into the house and get them out, but his assistant merely points out that they can't, because as we find out, the security system only works the security system panel is on the inside of the house, so they can't actually open the house and get into the house anyway. And of course Scooby, then of course Vincent Van Ghoul even points this out, pointing out that you feel that they're actually cornered and that nobody will able to actually get in and help them. At which point, Scooby and Shaggy point out that they know somebody who can, and then proceed to holler to one of the cameras to call Mystery Incorporated for help. And of course, also proceed to give them their numbers, and at which point all of the different members of Mystery Incorporated are told to stop what they're doing and come help Scooby and Shaggy get out of Vincent Van Ghoul's house. Velma is currently studying and listening to music, so not much of an inconvenience to her, but the second she gets the call, she drops everything to go and rescue her friends. But what we find out is that Fred and Daphne, not so enthused. As we find out, Fred and Daphne have been waiting at the bloody stake for about 2 hours on a date, waiting for their table to be ready. And of course, this sets up a running gag throughout the episode where Daphne isn't actually able to eat her food at the bloody stake, because they're immediately called away shortly after, and much to her annoyance. So throughout the rest of the episode, she's just very hungry. But in any case, Fred also makes a comment about how her stomach is growling a lot, and he thinks it sounds like a couple of alien worms that crawl into her stomach, but until she pointed something out, even because she points out that that's kind of ridiculous. But of course, after Fred gets the call, he immediately pulls them out of the restaurant, and they immediately go to Vincent Van Ghoul's house. And of course, they immediately meet with Bill, who informs them of the situation about how there's a rogue monster in the house and it's terrorizing them, and they don't really know any real way to actually get in the house. But in any case, Velma does point out that she actually does have an idea, revealing that she actually swiped the schematics for the house while she was on the way over, and reveals that she actually found out that there's actually a service panel in the shed that where the electrical wiring between the house and the external generator actually runs through, and points out that while it may be a bit of a tight fit, they could easily get in and out that way. But of course, the production assistant who shows up, he confesses that he points out that they might not be able to squeeze through, and points out that it'll probably be fine, but Bill just kind of snaps at him and tells him to stop bringing everybody down, and that's and also points out that production assistants, as a production assistant, he kind of isn't paid to pitch ideas, and that he's just supposed to, and tells him to just hurry up and get him his coffee and a donut, which causes Daphne to perk up a little bit because she wants one. But in case with that, they then proceed to climb into they proceed to go locate the access panel for the electrical, only to discover to their surprise that the access panel, for whatever reason, is open, and somebody clearly has used it recently. But of course they begin to crawl in as the monster actually winds up returning, and Nightfright then proceeds to, having figured out that he can use his horns to bend the bars that are keeping the security gate away from and keeping him away from Vincent Van Ghoul's Shaggy and Scooby. Proceeds to force his way in using his horns, which are apparently able to bend the metal bars a little bit, and after barging into the room and once again uttering his catchphrase, he then proceeds to corner Shaggy and Vincent Van Ghoul, but Scooby grabs his cape and he winds up going over the railing and landing on the ground. Somehow completely fine, I should mention, even though he falls what is admittedly several stories. While he does note that, and while the monster does eyeball the trio and tries to get back up, when he learns that the rest of the Mystery Inc. is coming, he immediately ducks out and disappears. At which point Scooby, Vincent Van Ghoul, and Shaggy actually meet with the rest of Mystery Incorporated and wonder if he's all right. And and of course Vincent Van Ghoul is very much not, because he's being terrorized in his own house. But Scooby and Shaggy admit that other than that, they're pretty fine. But in case and also point out that the monster that was attacking them actually fled the second they came into the room, and was likely scared off by them. And of course they have no idea what's actually going on. But it's at this point where Nightfright actually winds up coming back and scares them off, to once again reiterating his catchphrase, and at which point Vincent Van Ghoul once again escorts him back up to his bedroom, and they immediately run into his bedroom and barricade the place. And Vincent Van Ghoul admits that that they're likely doomed, that they're never gonna get out, and they'll never leave the house alive. At which point the rest of Mystery Incorporated try to gather up all the information that they know so far, and asks Vincent Van Ghoul what's going on, and merely points out that the monster isn't supposed to be there, and he has no idea what's going on. But he points out, and he also just points out that obviously he feels very scared about the fact that there's a monster in his house, and but when Fred points out that he feels like the monster is gone, Vincent Van Ghoul just points out that that's actually a common trope in horror, where the monster pretends to leave, and then the second they go outside, it comes back and attacks them. So, of course, he points out that the monster likely hasn't left and is just waiting for them to come out and say boo. But in any case, he also points out that he also proceeds to Daphne also proceeds to call him and wipe his brow, because he's very much not okay. But it's at this point where they actually point out that they're actually trying to find where Shaggy and Scooby actually console him, pointing out that he can easily get through this because he's one of the best actors ever, and he could easily find his way to work out this situation. But it's at this point where Vincent Van Ghoul reveals that he actually hasn't been all that popular lately, and has been in the midst of actually making a comeback. And what we find out is that obviously Scooby and Shaggy are his main group of fans, I should mention. Other than the Eskimo, they're basically it, and he even points that out, and that he's actually been trying to rekindle his career by pointing out that he obviously hasn't been having much luck in the acting department lately, and when he does point out that obviously he must be getting a lot of good parts, Vincent Van Ghoul then proceeds to gesture toward his nightstand, and reveals that he has a pile of scripts that he's just read and didn't like, and by his own admission, a lot of them aren't very good. But Scooby and Shaggy, in an effort to try and prove him wrong, start reading through some of the scripts, and yeah, a lot of them are terrible. I should mention, a lot of the ones they pick up aren't very good. And Vincent Van Ghoul even admits that some of the parts he was asked to play in them weren't very appealing either. Basically, there's this one where where they asked to be like this mutant gas frog or something and that's one of the movies. But he admits that they wanted him to play the part of gas, which he didn't really feel like doing. Of course, in the midst of this, there's a really funny thing where he thinks the monster has come back, but it's just Daphne's stomach growling. But in case after picking up a couple of movies and reading through them, Scooby and Shaggy eventually pick up one that are actually kind of interesting, and they note something very odd about it, which is that the script's name is Scream Scream Time for You to Die, and Vincent Van Ghoul recognizes that, and also notes that he recognizes the monster from it as the same one that's terrorizing him. And of course, Scooby and Shaggy immediately pick up on the fact that the monster has also been shouting the name of his own screenplay every time it's attacked him. So it's at this point where Scooby and Shaggy realize that he must be that whoever was involved with is pretending to be Nightfright must have been involved with the script, with the movie in some way. And sure enough, Velma also chimes in, pointing out that she got some very interesting footage from Bill when they went to go talk with him, and proceeds to show Vincent Van Ghoul the footage as well as Shaggy and Scooby, and sure enough, Vincent Van Ghoul points out that the monster seems to be hitting his marks for the camera, which he points out is something that a lot of actors do, and But Velma points out the hypocrisy in that Nightfright supposedly isn't an actor. He's not supposed to be, at least. And of course, they immediately get very confused and wonder what's going on. And at which point, Fred declares that he'll actually need to set a trap for it, and gestures to all the memorabilia and weird knickknacks that Vincent Van Ghoul has around his house, and points out that they'll actually be a pretty good trap making stuff. And when Vincent Van Ghoul kind of objects, pointing out that obviously that they can't, pointing out that it would be madness to go and catch the monster, Daphne merely points out that they can't stay in there all night, and ultimately that trusting Fred to build a trap is the best possible thing for them. And while Vincent Van Ghoul insists about the fact that he doesn't want to, it immediately cuts to him doing it anyway because that's a trope. But in case he then points out that even though he's going to be doing it, he still very much doesn't want to. But it's at this point where Shaggy actually reassures him, pointing out that he's a great actor, and that's all you. In that sense, since the monster obviously wants him to be scared, he simply has to act like he isn't scared at all. And of course, Vincent Van Ghoul points out that he'll try his best, but he does feel an urge to tinkle again. But he does feel an urge to tinkle himself. But Shaggy does reassure him that he'll be fine, and points out that if he just puts all of his acting stuff into play, the monster won't have any effect on him. And he reassures and Vincent Van Ghoul then proceeds to thanks Shaggy for the advice, but mistakes him for being Scooby, which Shaggy kind of humorously correcting him, and at which point Scooby and Shaggy actually wind up going out of the bedroom, and start looking around for the monster, and also cuddle each other again with a very funny thing where Vincent Van Ghoul claims that he's going to tinkle again, and Scooby admitting that he already did, which causes the two of them to stop hugging up next to him. But in any case, a few seconds after they step out of the bedroom, they're actually wind up being attacked by Nightfright, who once again reiterates his catchphrase, but Vincent Van Ghoul actually winds up stealing himself and using his acting chops to kind of make it seem like he's more so annoyed with Nightfright rather than actually scared of him. And also points out that he's just going to go Scooby and Shaggy are just going out to stretch their legs for a little bit, and then proceeds to go around the house where Nightfright humorously tries to scare Vincent Van Ghoul, and Vincent Van Ghoul is just kind of continuing to be stoic by just putting all of his acting skills to the test, and refusing to break character the entire time. It's a really funny way of them actually baiting the monster into a trap, and also I should mention throughout this entire sequence about Vincent Van Ghoul actually tells Scooby and Shaggy a story about how there was this time where he actually and I'm pretty sure this is a true story that he's telling, but he does admit that there's this story about how there was this time where he read a script pointing out that his part needed to be completely redone. The guy who wrote the script was having none of it. And then proceeds to point out that he actually rewrote the script himself, and the director was so impressed that he immediately gave immediately gave Vincent Van Ghoul accolades on it. So. And of course, they then eventually wind up back in Vincent Van Ghoul's bedroom where Fred has the trap. And but at this point, Nightfright is very annoyed with the fact that Vincent Van Ghoul isn't really being scared like at all. And of course, Vincent Van Ghoul eventually does kind of set him in the place where the trap is supposed to be sprung. And it's at this point where Fred actually turns it on, and they wind up trapping him in some medieval stocks that Vincent Van Ghoul just has lying around his house. And yeah, that's just a thing that he has. All of his stuff, he just has various movie props lying around. But in case they do wind up catching Nightfright in the trap, at which point they unmask him to discover that it's actually the PA from the production crew. But Vincent Van Ghoul actually knows him by a different name, Argus Fentonpoof, who, as we find out, is actually the director for Scream, Time for You to Die. And of course, he points. It's revealed that Argus isn't really a director anymore. As we find out, he did actually wind up pitching the idea to Vincent Van Ghoul to do the movie, but as we find out, apparently when he took up the idea of actually going to do the live action show where he just kind of scares people with his various monsters, the movie that was supposed to be Nightfright's debut movie was canceled. So yeah, because of that, Nightfright never really got his screen debut. Argus Fentonpoof never got his directorial debut. And he kind of blames Vincent Van Ghoul for turning down the idea for the movie. So, to that end, he used the maintenance panel to sneak in and out of the house, hid his Nightfright costume that he designed for the movie somewhere in the house in a closet. And then when it came time to actually scare Vincent Van Ghoul, he dressed up in his Nightfright costume, paid off the other actors so that he could kind of school them in a one-sided fight, which does kind of suggest the fact that he might not be the most physically built guy, but may have been playing that up for the cameras. And sure enough, his idea was to scare Vincent Van Ghoul and also maybe convince everybody to actually make a movie out of his character. So yeah, for that reason, he broke into the house and has been terrorizing Vincent Van Ghoul, Shaggy and Scooby, and later the rest of Mystery Incorporated this entire time because he's bitter about the fact that his movie was never made. And he also openly admits that he hopes that he'll actually be able to, by showcasing the creature on screen, that he'll actually be able to win somebody's approval and get his movie made. And also convince them that they were wrong about the movie in the first place as well. But it's at this point where the executive producer, Harry Sheest Boyzine, this guy shows up Harry. He shows up in a bathrobe, and he's very full of himself, but he also has a very good eye for what would and would not make a very good movie. And what he points out is that not only was the pilot episode of Vincent Van Ghoul's House of Horrors a success, but or at least that's what I'm going to call the TV show because it never is actually given a good name. But he also points out that he actually, admittedly, did indeed like the Nightfright character, and points out that he would also like to make a movie based on Argus Fentonpoof's life as well as the monster he's created. And Argus Fentonpoof, despite being arrested, despite having been unmasked, and despite being escorted out of Vincent Van Ghoul's mansion in handcuffs, he couldn't be any happier. As he points out, and this is kind of a little subversion of the I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for meddling kids. He's actually happy that Mystery Incorporated actually meddled in his affairs this time around because now he gets to be on the big screen and make a movie when he gets out of prison. So yeah, he walks away with a smile on his face and tells them to wait for him in 10 to 20 years when he'll eventually make his big screen debut. So yeah, despite being the bad guy, Argus ultimately got the last laugh because he ultimately won. He's ultimately the guy who got out. He's one of the few villains who actually not necessarily got away with it, but ultimately got what he wanted. He ultimately succeeded in his goal of actually scaring people, getting all of the things getting his own movie, and now he's very head over heels over the moon for that. So At which point, and it's at this point where now that everything's been settled, Daphne actually asks Vincent Van Ghoul for a favor, and what we find out is that they actually sat down for a second dinner where Shaggy and Scooby humorously remark that this might be the first time Daphne has eaten more than them, and Scooby even remarks that there's probably a first time for everything. At which point there's a very humorous fourth wall joke where Harry, having sat down with Mystery Incorporated and admiring what they did as a mystery solving team, decides to make a series out of their exploits, and this is a very also decides against, but then immediately decides against it when they point out that it probably wouldn't be very interesting, which is ironic because this series has now gotten 14 installments and a series of spin-off movies all set in the Scooby-Doo universe. And it's a very humorous thing where it's like, yeah, nobody would watch this, even though we've been watching it for the better part of half a decade, or rather for the better part of half a century, I should point out. It's been popular for many years now. So yeah, it's a very humorous thing where they point out that this thing wouldn't be popular, and it's just kind of a fourth wall joke about the fact that in actuality, Scooby-Doo, very popular franchise, very well known. But in case it's at this point where Vincent Van Ghoul dressed up as Mutant Bee, or the Mutant Wasp costume, he actually comes out with a tray full of cupcakes and asks if there's room for dessert, and the entire group just shares a humorous evil laugh, and that's where the episode ends. So yeah, this episode is kind of fun, and that's first and foremost, it's one of the few episodes where the villain not necessarily gets away with it, but gets what he wanted. Which I do kind of like it because for that reason. I mean, you don't really normally see the bad guy win, much less get away with it. So that's definitely, there's very few episodes where the bad guy actually succeeds in his plan. So yeah, it is definitely an interesting episode for that reason. But also, more on the point, Vincent Van Ghoul is just a fun character in this iteration, and that's he's very much this upbeat, eccentric actor, and they play up his eccentricities a lot because obviously that's the kind of person he is, and that might be true in the original cartoon. I don't know, I haven't seen much of it, but I do know that he was a main character in that one. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, but it is interesting in that Vincent Van Ghoul is just this really humorous character, and I do kind of like how they gave him a central episode in this one, and it's kind of fun seeing him just bounce around all the various Mystery Incorporated characters, and just kind of be himself, and just kind of showcase that yes, he is a very eccentric person and is very much a very eccentric actor, and I do kind of like it for that. But yeah, in any case, that's gonna do it for my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. And also, finally, if you want to see my live streams, be sure to check out Zack Marshall's Twitch. Link is down in the description. The link is also written out on the end screen if you want to type it in. But yeah, I stream it every Sunday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. If you want to go check those out. But yeah, be sure to go do, because because I do have a lot of fun doing them, and I would like to see more people to be over there and kind of help bring up my average viewership a little bit. I only stream like once a week, and I'm trying to work on that. But yeah, be sure to go check those out. Again, link is down in the description. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.